Morning.
Morning.
Thanks for coming. Welcome to the Times Weekly Mayoral Candidates Forum. We have one candidate missing at the moment. We're told he'll be here soon, but we're going to go ahead and get started. We are filming this today's forum, and it'll be available at the Times Weekly website, which is www.thetimesweekly.com. This is the third in our series of Joliet City Council forums. All three of the forums are available for viewing at the Times Weekly website. My name is Wayne Horn, and I will be the moderator for today's forum. The format we'll be following will be today. We'll start with a question, which the candidates are welcome to include part or all of their bio if that's how they want to use it. We're gonna limit responses to 2 minutes. We will go through the questions, and you'll all have a 2-minute response time. There will be audience questions at some moment. I'll determine when we can do that, and each candidate will be allowed one question of each other, with 2-minute responses. Then there will be a 2-minute closing statement by each of the candidates. Today, the three mayor candidates are Tom Girani, who's currently the incumbent mayor, Andy Mihelich is a candidate, and Robert Odekirk is a candidate. And we'll start today from this end. Well, let's start in the middle, and we'll alternate it, and I'll figure out where I want to go with this. First question for Mr. Odekirk: why should we vote for you to be mayor? And as I said, you can include some bio in that.
Thank you, Wayne. Thank you, everyone, for coming out. It's a beautiful Saturday afternoon. Thank you for coming out, being connected to your community. My name is Bob Odekirk. Currently, I'm the District 2 City Councilman here in Joliet. I was elected 4 years ago to District 2. Real briefly about myself, I'm a former Joliet police officer. I worked for 10 years in the Joliet Police Department. While working as a policeman, I went back to law school at John Marshall. I graduated in 2003, became an attorney, and left the police department. Currently, I am a downtown business owner. I own a law practice downtown, employ 9 people. I live in the Cathedral area. I am married. I have 3 children. I was elected to the city council in 2011. I went against a 16-year incumbent. And at the time, if you remember, Joliet had been coming off a period of unprecedented economic boom with the riverboats and with the economic things that had happened in Joliet for the last 15 or 20 years. At the time of the election 4 years ago, we were told that Joliet was facing a $27 million deficit. And it stunned me as a former city employee as to how Joliet could have been in that type of situation. With over $700 billion in riverboat revenue coming into the city, how could we have found ourselves in that situation? Once I was elected to the council, a proposal was brought forward by Mayor Girani to raise 4 new taxes to clear up what we were told was a $17 million deficit. I opposed those taxes. I met with the mayor in private. I voted against them. By a 5-4 vote, the taxes passed. We found out about 30 days afterwards, the city came forward and reported that there never was a $17 million deficit. There was, in fact, $16 million had been lost and found. It gave me a good inkling of what I was in for on the city council. I stood up at the time and did the right thing, voted no for the taxes, did what I thought was right. I realized that the mayor was not shooting me straight or shooting the people straight, and that city staff was part of it. I was an independent voice in the council for the last 4 years. Going forward as mayor, I promised to do the same, to be honest with the taxpayers and be straight with people about the economic situation in the city and what we need to do to solve our problems.
Tom?
Yes, thank you, Wayne, and the Times Weekly for putting on this forum today, and the people that have come here. My name is Tom Girani, born and raised in Joliet, lived here all my life. I have, Rose and I have been married 53 years. We have 3 children, 8 grandchildren, and 2 great-grandchildren. I'm running for mayor because Joliet is better off today than it was 4 years ago when I was elected. One of my opponents says that he voted against the tax increase. That he did for the first budget. But the next 3 budgets, 2013, 2014, and 2015, included that tax raise, and he voted for that budget. So he did vote for the tax raises. And if he didn't like them, he should have opposed them then. without my proposed tax raise, I have the numbers right here that we got from our CFO. If we didn't have that tax raise, right now, we'd be $768,851 short in our budget. So it was needed. I brought in many businesses. We did 21,000 building permits, brought in $500 million in permit fees, $11 million in tap-on fees. Joliet is better off today than it was 4 years ago when I took over, and I want to continue to bring Joliet back into good shape. Thank you.
Andy?
A special thank you to the Times Weekly and everyone for attending today. Joliet's at a turning point. We grew too fast in a declining economy. Now we're stuck with some big city problems, both social and economic. These issues need to be dealt with from a bold new frame of reference, and that's why I'm running. I feel that my qualifications, skills, and abilities directly enables me to confront these issues straightforwardly, properly, and to serve the best interests of the people of Joliet. That's why I proposed 101 ideas for a new Joliet. These ideas are not just traditional solutions for traditional problems. They're a creative roadmap on how we can realize all of our aspirations for Joliet. I was born and raised in Joliet. I'm a member of St. Mary's Nativity Church, lifelong parishioner. I went to Joliet Catholic High School, went on to receive my bachelor's degree from Northern Illinois University, my master's degree from Governor State, and an advanced certificate in education from the University of Illinois. I then went on to work for Joliet Junior College, where I was a 30-year employee, retiring as a vice president with the college. After retiring from the college, I ran for the Joliet Junior College Board of Trustees. I'm in my second term. Currently, I'm the chairman of the board of Joliet Junior College. I'm pleased to say that we instituted a master and a strategic plan when I first got on the board. One of the biggest building projects since the college created its campus on the east side in the early 1970s. Over a $200 million project, all brought in on time and under budget. I'm also pleased to say that we've had a balanced budget all of my 8 years at the college. And one of the things that I'm most proud of this year within the budget is that we had no increase in our health care cost. So I'm pleased with that, and we'll move on to the next question.
Thank you. So let's get to it. Do you think there's enough diversity in the police and fire department and other city departments? And we're talking about the employees, the diversity within the employee group. We'll start with Mayor Girani.
No, there's no question that the diversity does not reflect the diversity in the city of Joliet. It's going to take an effort to bring that diversity back. I know I appoint the Fire and Police Board, and it contains a business person, a retired police officer, retired firefighter, an African-American gentleman, and a member of the trades. The last test that the fire department had, I believe over 300 people took it. I don't know how many were minorities. I can't answer that. I do not get involved in that, but you're absolutely correct. I know the staff is making an effort to hire minorities throughout the water, sewer departments, and in City Hall, but it does not reflect, and it can be improved. There's no question about it.
Andy?
Diversity in bringing our police and fire force reflective of our population is one of my ideas and one of my goals, and one that needs to be directly given a priority. They should be reflective of our population, as well as all of the departments within the city. To do that, it starts with the appointments made by the Police and Fire Commissioner Board. Those appointments would be the first appointments that the mayor would make this June. Those terms are up this June, so those would be the first appointments. This is where change starts and where I will begin. So you would have to look at this in terms of all of the boards, commissions that the mayor makes recommendations for, to make sure that they're inclusive. dealing directly with the police and firefighter workforce, we need to take some special actions for all of our candidates. First, we need to ensure that we got qualified candidates coming into the process. What we need to do then is to provide testing services, just like you take an ACT test. You get some practice, develop a habit, and then you develop an employability plan for those members that might not be able to pass the exam, so that you do have a plan for recruitment to bring that workforce reflective while increasing the opportunities for women.
Bob?
Thank you. I agree with the mayor. The current makeup of the police and fire departments does not adequately reflect Joliet's diversity. I will say, as a former police officer, I spent most of my career working in Area 1, which is on the northeast side of Joliet, largely minority communities. I spent most of the career working up in the Forest Park area in the Hill. So I understand from a personal level the difficulties. Those jobs are hard enough to do. It's harder when there's a cultural divide, and it's almost impossible when there's a language divide. Currently, on the Joliet Fire Department, over 200 members, there are 12 African-American firefighters, and there are 2 Hispanics from our city. It's unacceptable. As the mayor pointed out, and as Mr. Mihalich pointed out, the mayor is directly responsible for appointments to the Police and Fire Board. That's where this problem begins, and that you need to look no further than to see who's being put on that board to where this problem is coming from. As mayor, I have pledged that I will put people on the Police and Fire Board that adequately represent our community to ensure that this problem gets corrected. And I will say, in previous forums, as recently as last Saturday at the NAACP, Mayor Girani suggested that the reason why there are no minorities, or not enough minorities, is that they can't find any to take the test, and that's a quote. And I said a week ago, and I'm going to repeat today, I think it's insulting to minorities and everyone in Joliet to suggest that Hispanics or African Americans are not interested in jobs, local jobs that pay over $100,000 a year. We simply know that's not true. Thank you.
You know, when I expected those answers, and they're good answers, and the Police and Fire Board certainly is a place to start. But specifically, as the mayor, the face of Joliet, what would you do to recruit those minorities? And we'll start back with Tom.
Well, first of all, a couple of things. Councilman Odekirk stated he spent time on the east side. I spent 22 years on the fire department, 11 of those years on the east side of Joliet, 8 of those years on the ambulance on the east side of Joliet. I was on the east side of Joliet when Mr. Odekirk was still living in Chicago. What I would do is, and I did say it's hard to get minorities to take the test. I don't know if every time they see a firefighter, they're going into a building, or when the police officer comes, it's a bad situation. I don't know what the reason is, but I will say this, and this was a while back when I was president of the firefighters. I, along with Rodney Marion, who was our black human resources director, we went to the midnight basketball court and talked to these minorities to try to get them to take the test. He explained what needed to be done to take the test. I explained the benefits, etc. We went to Homeowners Association. We really reached out. And also, I sat down with Mr. Marion and negotiated the first, what's the word I'm looking for? First, to get minorities promoted and hired, okay? I know that was a long time ago. Maybe we need to look at it. What I've asked, and I've talked to the police chief and the representatives from the union, to maybe start a group like the police department has Explorers, maybe start something like that in the fire department to get the minorities in there to see the job and see it's not as bad as it is, and try to get them to take the test. That's the first step, I think, that has to be taken. We need to get them in there and work with the firefighters and learn the job and get them interested in taking the test. When I took the test, I took it because I had friends that were on the department and they asked me to take the test. The same thing with my nephews. We'd have a family get together. I'd talk about the fire department, what a great job it is. They took the test and got hired. That's what has to happen. I think it has to come from the minorities on the job to reach out to their friends, to their relatives, and talk to them to come in and take the test and get hired on the police and fire department. That goes for the police department and the fire department.
Come back to Bob on that.
Thank you. The mayor referenced the Police Explorer program. That's been in place for a long time. I think it works. Another thing that I think works on the police side is the Safe School program, where we have police officers in the schools with the children. I think it serves two purposes. Obviously, number one, safety. Thank God we've never had a school shooting here in Joliet, and I hope it never happens. But number two, I think it breaks down barriers. From a very early age, children are exposed to police officers and are told that police are your friend. They're not necessarily out to get you, which is probably the view most teenagers have of every race. That program, unfortunately, was done away with by prior councils. It still doesn't exist, but I'm pushing for it as I continue to push to hire more police officers. There is nothing currently in place with the fire department. The mayor talked about speaking about some type of Fire Explorer program. I think it's a great idea. I don't know what's taken so long. It's probably only being talked about now because we're on the campaign trail, but I don't think it should be talked. I think our Joliet Fire Department should be marketing itself to young people and should be reaching out in those communities, much like the police department continues to do, to try to get minority participation in these jobs.
Andy?
We need to have both a short-term and a long-term solution to attracting people to the police and firefighter workforce. In the short term, we need to go back and identify everybody that took the exam and failed. Bring these people back in for training sessions, find out why they did not pass the exam, and set up an individualized employment plan or education plan for all of these individuals so that we can quickly move minorities into the police and firefighter workforce. From a long-term perspective, we need to start, especially at the high schools, in recruiting through our high school counselors, recruiting students to be interested in these careers. And then as they move on to Joliet Junior College, which we do a vast majority of the training for the Joliet Police and Fire workforce, is to encourage them to continue with that career, identify the issues that they may have in passing the exam, and develop specific one-on-one counseling outside the classroom training sessions so that minority applicants can have a better opportunity to pass the exam and secure employment for these good-paying jobs.
Thank you, gentlemen. As the leader of the city, how would you reduce the gun violence and murders we've seen in the last year beyond hiring more police officers? It's I think, been something that's had a noticeable uptick in the last several months, and I think it's one of the major concerns that public safety is a major concern that most people have. So, how would you respond to the reduction in the gun violence, other than to say more police, or you're for it? Andy?
Here, the city has to step outside of its comfort zone of municipal governance and start working with church and religious leaders, community-based organizations, schools, etc. Our police force does an excellent job. They can do a better job with more community police officers. Community police officers can do a better job if the preventive issues of violence are addressed with as well. And this includes educational encouragement and family structures, family support structures for individuals. So we have to move outside of our typical comfort areas and begin working on these social issues that affect crime and violence, and move and work with these groups. There's a march this Sunday. There's been marches. We need to raise the issue through these outside entities. And this is how you do it, by working on the social issues of violence.
Tom?
Andy made some good points about the churches and clubs getting involved. All the homeowner association meetings that I go to, one of the first things out of the police officer's mouth is the neighbors that live in that area have to be the eyes and ears of the police department. If something happens and it's not right, you need to call the police, not necessarily the emergency phone number, but the non-emergency phone number. They have to get involved, get more neighborhood associations so they get to know their neighbors. And when somebody's in the neighborhood that they don't recognize, you know, kind of watch them. The police can't be everywhere. I don't care how many police we hire. They cannot be everywhere. It takes the neighbors to get involved and to call them when they see something wrong. And when something does go wrong, they need to step forward. And I understand the concerns about retaliation if you come forward, but I think the police have to meet with them and tell them that they will keep their name quiet and not let it out who they are. But it takes the community to come together to be the eyes and the ears of the police department.
Bob?
Thank you. I agree in part with both answers, but I think the answer is clear. It's a neighborhood policing program in Joliet. When I came to Joliet in 1993, when I was hired, the crime rates in Joliet skyrocketed. The gangs were everywhere. I think long-term residents understand that, how bad it was in Joliet. Neighborhood policing was a new concept when I came on, and it was real controversy on the police department. As a young officer, there was a big divide between the old-timers who didn't want to be social workers, wanted nothing to do with this program, and younger officers that were being plugged in, being told it's not enough just to answer calls, to go and investigate the latest shooting or go pick up the body. You need to be plugged into the community. The program was implemented by prior chiefs, and it worked. Unfortunately, again, that program was done away with by previous councils. But I think the results are clear. When you look what happened in the 90s and in the 2000s, how the crime rate in Joliet was reduced, it can be directly tied to that program. I know personally, again, I spoke about working on the Hill. I worked hand in hand with Louise Ray at the Forest Park Community Center. That relationship began, as anyone knows Miss Ray did, it began very acrimoniously. She was not pro-police. She was a very anti-violence, but pro-African-American activist who worked hand in hand with myself and other police officers. Our relationship was so good that by the time I left the police department, I actually had a key as a patrolman working in Sector 11 on the Hill. I had a key to her community center. We worked with her on a daily basis. We worked with the housing authority people. It was a new way of police work, and it worked. Unfortunately, because of manpower cuts, we got away from it in Joliet. We're moving in that direction. This new council has pushed the mayor to hire police and continue to push to get the neighborhood policing program fully staffed so they can work with the organizations in the communities, with the neighborhood groups, with the preachers, and to collectively to reduce the violence in Joliet. It worked before, it will work again.
As a follow-up to that, what I'm hearing from the three of you as candidates, that there is a need for additional police. If you hire additional police, if you're intent on hiring new police, how are you going to pay for this? What are you going to do to generate the revenue necessary? And we'll start with, Bob, we'll start with you on this end again.
You know, that's more than a 2-minute answer to that question. But I think we've
That's
seen.
why I get up here and ask the hard question.
I think we've seen in Joliet, the current mode, the way we're doing business doesn't work, okay? Since the boats have come in, I already said $700 million in riverboat revenue. The money's gone. And I ask you as residents, do you see it in your neighborhoods? Do you see $700 million in your streets and your water mains? Do you see it in the city services that you're getting? We had 51 snow plows in 2009. We're down to 31 today. The police department is 45 people short. We've done away with solid programs. We need to find a new way to do business in Joliet. It's not enough to sit back and wait. I'm answering your question in a roundabout way. It's not enough to sit back and wait for the next store to come into the mall and say, look, we're bringing jobs to Joliet. Or wait for the next business to come to Center Point. They will come to Center Point. The intermodal's there. They're going to come. That's not enough. Joliet needs to actively market itself, needs to go out. They need a strong, dynamic mayor to go out and bring businesses into this community. We have a west side. Mr. Mahalis talked about overexpansion. He's correct. We have a far west side that goes all the way into Kendall County now with no infrastructure in place to support it. We're responsible. We're paying for the snow plowing out there, for the police, for the fire services, for the water out there. The tax body, the tax base out there doesn't support itself. Joliet has a chance to remarket itself and remarket those neighborhoods in that area, but it's not going to be done with the way we've done business for the last 25 years. A lot of the problems in Joliet were covered up for a long time because of the riverboat revenue. Those days are coming to an end. We're looking at riverboat cuts, another boat coming into the Chicagoland area, which is going to significantly reduce our income here. Mayor Girardi's answer 4 years ago was to raise taxes. It's the wrong answer. To go back to our citizens and demand more money because the system of government is broken is not the answer. You need that dynamic new leadership to reintegrate Joliet and bring Joliet in the 21st century and bring real business, real industry, and economic growth to Joliet.
Thank you. Go to Andy.
Well, I would like to bring back the neighborhood community policing program as quickly as possible. In the short term, again, we're not going to be, we can look for all the economic development issues, commercial development, industrial development. Those are going to take a few years to start bringing those in at the levels that we would like to address the police and fire, not for all of the police officers. But on the short term, when I talked earlier about healthcare cost, that's how when the first four community police officers were proposed in the budget, neither the mayor nor Councilman Oderkirk spoke up. That request was made by the city manager. It was funded through reductions in the health care cost. When I mentioned that for Joliet Junior College, we're self-insured, as well as like the city and their health care costs. Health care costs are over $20 million for the city. If we can reduce those costs in the same way we've been doing that for Joliet Junior College, that would allow us to have our spending priorities shift so that we can hire more police officers in the long term, while giving us an opportunity to lay out a comprehensive economic development plan that's going to bring in the additional monies from both industrial and commercial sources to address not just the issues of increasing our police force, but all city services.
Tom?
As Councilman Oderkirk stated, he voted against my budget in 2012, which raised some taxes and froze the seniors' sewer and water rates. Because of that budget, last week, the city of Joliet hired 7 new police officers, and there's more to come later in the year. Were it not for that budget and the 5 people that had the guts to make that tough decision to raise those taxes, we knew it was going to come up in this election. We knew it was going to come up, but it was the right thing to do. Instead of kicking the can down the road like they've done in Springfield and put the burden on our children, we made the decision to raise the taxes, and it was the right decision. Without them taxes, we wouldn't have been able to hire them 7 police officers, nor would we be able to hire any more down the road. And he says you need a dynamic leader. The 4 years before I came mayor, we had 890 building permits. I went out, we contacted the gentleman from Tony's Finer Foods when that place went vacant. We went up to his store to see him and talked him into coming here. We had, the 4 years before, we had 890 building permits. We had 21,000 building permits the last 4 years. $500 million in taxes, all right? The Centerpoint brings in over $2 million in taxes to the city of Joliet. Now, if that's not a dynamic leader, I'm sorry.
Before we get entirely off of that subject, it's been a few years now, I forget how many, but it's been a few years since we allowed police and fire to live outside the city limits. Do you think that, that we now have some living outside, particularly police officers living outside the city, has had an impact, negative or positive, probably negative, on public safety because they're no longer a part of the community? And let's start with Tom.
I was totally against that. I went to, 6 years ago, I went to a candidates forum with the police department, and they asked me if I would support living outside the city. I said, the only way would be if that's what it takes to settle a contract. That's the only way I'd agree with it. I do not agree with it. I think it's good that they live in the city. We give them squad cars to take home. They park them in the neighborhoods. I think that helps the crime rate. There's no doubt in my mind. They work for the city. I feel they should live here, but I was always against it. I preached it when I was president of the firefighters. I still am, but I voted for it because it was something that was going to settle the contract a few years ago. But I firmly believe that they should live in the city, all city employees.
Andy?
You want the best qualified people for the job. So if one of our goals is to increase minority participation in our police and fire workforce, we need to ensure that we're going to attract the best qualified individuals. So we need to investigate before we make a quick decision, because having employees live within the city is the optimum approach. But you don't want to distract and inhibit the attraction of individuals. In a lot of cases, you have spouses that live and work outside of the area, and usually there's a mutual place in between that that couple is going to live. So you need to investigate if you're going to be detracting from getting your objectives first before you make a blanket decision of moving everybody back into the city.
Bob?
Well, like the mayor, I also am against it, but I didn't vote for it. I didn't vote for contracts that allowed it to happen. I will say, as a police officer, there is a safety issue. My squad car, when we get take-home cars, it was damaged more than once in front of my house. It got shot up. There are several police officers that have had their homes shot up, one with an AK-47. The bullet went through a brick wall. So there is a concern amongst police, and I understand why some of them are concerned about that. But having said that, these are good paying jobs. They're local jobs. I believe if you want to be employed by the city of Joliet, you should keep that money locally. You should reinvest in our communities. I do think it's hurt us from a public safety perception. I think just from a public relations perception, I think a lot of Joliet residents don't like the idea of paying the taxes that they do to these people, and they take their money elsewhere. And I think it's hurt our school system, and I think the Catholic schools are suffering. I think a lot of these the children of these police and firemen would be in our school system or in Catholic schools are now taking that money and send it to other communities. It was something that was collectively bargained for. When the contracts are open, I would hope that'd be something our labor unions would reapproach. But I do think it's something that the city hall, that the mayor's office and city government should lean on the unions to get those requirements back in, that any current or any new employee has to reside within the city of Joliet. That was the rubric that I was hired under, and Mayor Girani, and it worked for a long time. There was no reason to change it.
Just for my own edification, clarification, and I believe you answered it positively, Bob, and so you would bring it back up if it was negotiable, if it was possible to negotiate, you would bring back residency as?
I would. It is possible. When the contracts are opened again,
Okay.
it's something that should be put on the table.
Okay, Tom?
I agree. I pushed before this to give points to the residents during this, give points to the residents, because I figure if you live here and pay taxes here, your son or daughter should get the points because you live here and pay taxes here.
Okay,
But
that's all. That's
Okay.
fine. And Andy?
I would favor it as long as it doesn't restrict minority applicants into the city.
Okay. We're going to move on now to another topic, the budget. And I have to admit that I follow this particular aspect probably a little more closely than I do others as far as my column is concerned. And I've heard a lot of rhetoric at forums. I've heard rhetoric. I've seen the rhetoric in the campaign pieces. And so what I did for my own edification was pull page 29 of the current budget, which shows how much money is coming in and how much money is going out in the operating fund, in the general fund. It shows on that page that for what the council approved in 2015, there will be approximately just round it off, approximately $164 million of revenue and $173 million of expenses. The reserve that has been accumulating or has been utilized to offset that difference, apparent difference, has dwindled by about somewhere in the neighborhood of $8 to $9 million. So with that knowledge, the last 2 years the council's balanced the budget by borrowing from surplus funds. How will you avoid that in the next year and in the coming years? And we'll start with Tom.
the reason we were able to take them dollars out of the reserve was because of my proposed budget and the tax raises. There's $35 million. Part of that money that was taken out was to hire police officers. The only way to offset that is find a new source of revenue, which I did in 2012 by a slight raise in sales tax, telecommunication tax, or go out and bring businesses here that brings tap-on fees, permit fees, and sales tax to the area. Otherwise, you have to raise taxes, and I don't believe in doing that again. So that's why I'm out working to bring businesses here. That's why over the last 4 years, we've had $500 million in permit fees and $11 million in tap-on fees, and Centerpoint has brought in over $2 million in taxes. That's what you have to do. You have to go out and bring businesses here and bring sales tax here. And that's what I've been doing for the last 4 years, and the numbers show it.
Andy?
I was at the pre-council meeting in December when the 2016 or the 2015 budget was being proposed. Many of the responses from the council members were, "I just seen this document. I'm not 100% sure on all issues." That's the process that I would change. We develop our yearly budgets inappropriately for the city. What we need to do is to address this on a year-round basis through public discussion. So we start with taking all of the new spending initiatives that all council members would like to present. You prioritize those among the council members. You then take a look at some of the spending priorities within the existing budget. You develop a prioritized list of your new funding initiatives that you would like to see enacted and some of the current spending initiatives. You then give those initiatives to city staff and the city manager, asking the city manager to present a budget that includes those priorities, eliminating spending priorities that did not make the cut, so that you come back in plenty of time for council discussions to see that if you're going to be adding the new spending priorities, this is how it's going to affect items that need to be eliminated, so that every council member is fully aware of all of the issues. And then you're probably, you take a look at the revenue side to see if you're going to support that through taxes or not, and then you move forward with in determining what items need to be left out.
Bob?
Thank you. The mayor twice now has referenced $500 million in permit fees. I can assure you the city of Joliet has not collected $500 million in permit fees the last 4 years. Please try to keep the facts straight, Mayor.
I have the facts.
To answer the question,
I have the facts.
Wayne, I'm going to be frank with you. I don't know. We have a situation in Joliet where the pension funds were underfunded for years. We currently are paying somewhere between $15 and $20 million extra per year to catch up on the pension funds for what was done during the boom years. When the money was rolling in with the riverboats, we didn't meet our pension obligations. So now currently all of us are stuck with that bill. We have an Evergreen Terrace project where there is no final cost. We don't know what it's going to cost. We know what it's going to cost to buy the building. There's no plan on file to redevelop and what the cost of that would be. There's no plan on file on what it's going to cost to tear the buildings down. We don't even know, as we speak today, whether there's asbestos in those buildings or not. If there are, the cost to tear down could be $10, $15 to $20 million. None of this has been budgeted for. None of it's been planned for. We know Will County is going to come to Joliet and expect money to keep the courthouse downtown. As we sit here today and ask the mayor, he can't tell you how much they're going to come. We don't even have a ballpark figure with what Will County is going to ask us to pay to ante up to keep the courthouse downtown. Unfortunately, there were boom years with Joliet. The money was misspent. We're now left in a situation where, as Mayor Girani pointed out, he had to raise taxes to make the balanced budget. Going forward, there are real struggles with Joliet, and I'll repeat with what I said earlier. The model is broken. The city government model we've been following is broken. It has to be redone and redone the right way. That's the only way we could become financially solvent, Wayne.
One way or another, I'm going to get these three to answer whether, because every one of you has said, you're going to freeze property taxes. You're not going to raise property taxes. Every council candidate has said the same thing for their districts. That only leaves two alternatives. You're going to cut services or you're going to cut projects. We've got, as was mentioned, we've got Evergreen Terrace. We've got the possibility of cost overruns, probability of cost overruns for the multimodal transportation center. We've got Silver Cross Field issues, maintenance issues that will be ongoing. And of course, we do have the courthouse, and that's just a few of the projects that are out there that we are, in all probability, going to have to put at least some dollars towards over the next 4 years. Then we also, on the other side of the ledger, we have declining gaming revenue, which there is no evidence that that's not going to continue to decline. And we, of course, have the Rauner budget from the state that says you may very well lose a share of the income tax revenue. And then the possibility is being talked about in a very positive manner that there will be another casino in the southwestern suburbs. So I'm just going to ask you, what projects or what services are you looking to, or do you feel might need to be cut back if we're going to meet all of the immediate needs, money needs that we have? And we'll start with Andy.
I can't give a specific answer because I think that giving a specific answer also takes away from finding that answer that Wayne is looking for here. As I mentioned earlier, we need to have the entire city council prioritize their new spending initiatives against the current spending initiatives, then having the city administration identify those projects that need to be cut. The city manager can give the best recommendations or options as to what items need to be discussed. We want those directives coming from the city manager. He or she would make those recommendations to the city council as to what programs needed to be cut, to what degrees they needed to be cut. So there is full disclosure and buy-in from all city council members. You do not want, as previously seen here, a city council member debating a recommendation of the mayor. The whole city council needs to collaboratively decide and to be honest with the Joliet citizens as to what items need to be cut for what reasons, and to be working as a collective entity to find that solution as a group.
Tom?
I don't think we can cut anymore. In 2008, 2009, when the economy went down, we cut. We offered early retirements to those that were eligible. We cut some people at City Hall. We are down to the bare bones. What we need to do, and you know, you mentioned new revenue. I've got, we asked for an estimate of revenues from the 2012 increases, all right? 2012 actual, $8.535,640,000. 2013, $9.133,124,000. 2014, over $9 million. Estimated in 2015, over $9 million. There's $36 million extra revenue that come in because some of us had the guts to take the bull by the horns and vote for the tax raise. It's a projected unassigned fund balance from 12/31/2015 of $35 million. Revenue deduction, if increases were not implemented, was 36. That's where the $800,000 hole in the budget is. What we need to do is what I've been doing the last 4 years, going out and bring business, industry, and jobs to the city. We can't cut. The police department, the fire department, sewer, street and water department, our city hall, we have people doing 2 and 3 jobs. We are down to the bare bones. We cannot cut anymore. We need to find new sources of revenue, and that's going out and bring businesses here and sales tax and real estate taxes, what I've been doing the last 4 years.
Bob?
Thank you, Wayne. I think the best short-term solution, something that's never been done in Joliet, is to hire a lobbyist to go to Springfield or go to Washington, D.C. to assist in securing government money. In 2013, at the end of 2013, the mayor prepared a end-of-year report. It hasn't been done for 2014 yet, currently, curiously enough, but it was done a year ago. In that report, 2013, the city of Joliet budgeted for $38 million in grant money. What we actually received was $12 million in grant money. We left, theoretically, $26 million on the table. It's never been done in Joliet. It should be done. Bring a lobbyist in or a lobbying firm. They'll pay for themselves. Last year, our federal government gave out over $600 billion in grant money. That money's not coming to Joliet. I don't think relying on government grants is a long-term solution. I do think it's a short-term solution. Grants that could go towards helping our costs with museums or with the Rialto or with public safety or with infrastructure repair, the money's out there. There are professionals that know how to get it. We've never done this in Joliet, but I think as a short-term solution, it's definitely something that we need to look going forward. And I do think it would plug or help plug some of the gaps in our budget that we're currently facing.
Thank you. I take it by those answers it remains a head scratcher. I think it's good. I don't mean to discredit any of what was said, but it will remain a concern that I will be watching, and I'm sure a lot of residents in the city will also.
If I may, I beg to differ.
I can see an upswing, but what I'm referring to is that the needs are increasing substantially faster, it appears, than the revenues. And that doesn't mean you shouldn't be doing what you're doing. I'm not suggesting otherwise. I'm just saying that we're running pretty fast, and rightfully so. But it's still, I don't know that we're catching the rabbit yet. How will you provide more access to city contracts for minority-owned businesses and companies that hire minority employees? And let's start with Andy.
I believe there should be more minority participation in city contracts. To me, minority participation means more workers involved in city contracts and more minority-owned businesses in city contracts. On the minority businesses side, the city should schedule training for certification on a regular basis to get minority businesses certified so that they can bid on city contracts. On the worker side, we need to encourage our trade unions to have more minorities within all of the trade unions. The legislative committee for the city just discussed giving some priority points to businesses that live that are in Will, Grundy, or Kendall counties. I would like to see our legislative committee investigating, giving additional points to minority companies that are from Joliet, and to give preference points to companies that bid on projects that have its workforce reflective of its membership base.
Bob?
Yeah, I largely agree with Mr. Mihalich's answer. I won't repeat it. I think, however, I think we need to help local companies get certified, and I think the city government, I think the mayor's office needs to work with the trades and help training for our young people. It is something we've talked about with Jim Hock, our city manager, about doing locally. It's done in other communities. It should be done in Joliet. I would just say one interest or one concern I would have, it's important to have minority participation. I think it's just as important that it's local participation. I would want to see if there's any favoritism, it's being done towards local Joliet companies, both minority and non-minority. But having said that, I think Mr. Mahalich's points were well taken.
Tom?
I too agree with Andy. You know, it's open bidding. You have to be pre-qualified. What we need to be very careful of is if we limit it to minority businesses. If you're going to limit it to those that are in the city is one thing, but if you don't, you're going to get minority businesses from Chicago, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and there's no guarantee that the local businesses are going to get the bid. Councilman Odekirk question about grants. I think he forgot about the $2.2 million grant that we got for the Rialto that I worked with the governor, the last governor with, and the $30+ million grant that we got for our transportation center that's really going to help. Getting back to the minority bidding, the problem is we have to have more minority businesses, because if you limit it to minority businesses and you only have one, I know Mr. Foster's a union electrician company, but if you only have one and you set it aside and he's the only one that bid, it's going to ultimately cost the taxpayer more money. I'm just quoting what he said. He's the only union electrician minority in the city. Okay, and as you limit it to that, you're going to have other, the cost is going to be higher to the taxpayers because you only have one business, minority business bidding on it. So. Okay.
Here's one of the big questions that's been hovering over the city for several years now. Should the city proceed with buying Evergreen Terrace? Why or why not? And we'll start with Tom on this.
Absolutely. That started in 2005. It started with the members of the council at that time. I know it's going to be costly, but it's the right of these people to live in a nice place. It's a quality of life issue. How do you put a price on a quality of life issue? It's wrong. Some people made the argument they're going to be moved from where they're at, and they know the people, they know the neighbors, and they're going to have to go to a totally new place. But we've asked the police chief to do a crime study and found out that the Evergreen Terrace area is the biggest crime area in the city. Now, if that was me and I lived there with my family, even though it would be tough to move from my neighbors, I would want to move to an area there's less crime and I can raise my children without worrying about them getting in trouble. So it's a quality of life issue. How do you put a price on that? I'm sorry, I cannot. I spent a lot of time in there when I was on the fire department. I've seen some of the apartments and I see what the residents live in, and I don't think it's right.
Bob?
Well, the mayor says, how do you put a price on it? Unfortunately, as the stewards of the city of Joliet, we have to put a price on it, and we have to find a way to pay for it. And that's the real issue I've had with the Evergreen issue. I was a police officer. I spent more time in those buildings than everyone on the council put together. I've arrested people in those buildings. I've chased people through those buildings. I fought people in those buildings. I had a gun stuck in my face in those buildings. No one knows the conditions there better than me. It is a problem. It's been a problem for a long time, and the city should proceed with this to solve that problem. But having said that, we can't walk blindly off a cliff. There has to be reasonable people to come forward with a plan on how we're going to do this. It's not enough for a politician to sit at a city council meeting and say, I want Evergreen Terrace gone. We all want it gone. We all want to see a better quality of life for the people there, and we want to see the neighborhood improve. That was never the issue. The issue is how do we do it? The problem here in Joliet, as I pointed out, I was an attorney for the city of Chicago when I left our police department. I was in Chicago when all the housing projects came down. Robert Taylor Homes, Ida B. Wells, Cabrini Green, Rockwell Gardens, I was there. The city of Chicago took an exact opposite approach to what we've done here in Joliet. The Chicago Housing Authority worked in conjunction with HUD to tear those buildings down. Here in Joliet, we have shunned the Joliet Housing Authority. The city of Joliet has assumed that role and has fought HUD in trying to tear those buildings down. It was a mistake when it happened. It's a mistake today. We need to partner up with HUD. We need to partner up with the Housing Authority, and we need to do, again, follow the lead of what was done in Chicago and every other major city, partner up with non-for-profit community groups to find a way to get this done. There is federal money available, but it's not going to come to the city of Joliet. The city of Joliet is not a landlord, and that federal money is not going to come to us. It will come to these other groups, but we need to reach out and work with them to accomplish this and get it done.
Andy?
Evergreen Terrace was my number one issue or number one idea in my 101 ideas, because it's the most intimate problem that is facing the city. The city should take possession of Evergreen Terrace, find alternate Joliet housing for all of the residents being displaced, and then tear down or rebuild the units from a multi-income approach. On this particular issue, and we still have time to address this issue, we hear the mayor saying that a plan is coming by the management group. We hear Councilman Oderkirk saying, I need a plan. If I was mayor, I would bring the Holstein group into a city council meeting, have the Holstein group present. These are all of the issues that we're planning on investigating and finding answers to in our study, both from an economic and a social issue. Then ask every city council member, would I what issues and what recommendations would you need to have included in the plan so that you can make a decision when one is presented as to whether or not we acquire Evergreen Terrace or not. We should not be letting personal issues get in the way of good city governance. So I would recommend to the mayor that he bring that group in, and I'd recommend to Councilman Oderkirk that he express all of his concerns, so those are included in the plan, and everybody has the issues then to make the best decision when that plan is submitted.
Revenues from Evergreen Terrace are, that are provided would be reduced if the density is reduced. So what revenue sources would be used to pay for the debt of buying additional living quarters, providing additional living quarters, and paying the legal bills? So where are we going to get the money, in other words, to do that? Where is that coming from if the density is reduced and thereby reducing the revenue? We'll start with Andy on this.
In listening to the city manager, the approach that would be taken is that bonds would be issued to cover the shortfall. So that the city manager has tentatively said that his first reaction as this approach is a viable approach. It goes back to the total concept that the management consulting group would need to work with the city manager to confirm those final numbers to make sure that they are all workable, above-board, and correct. We have a history within the city of not controlling the budget. This is going to be, you know, a $15 to $30 million project probably by the time it's all done. We need to ensure that we have a correct oversight. Every possible expense that could be coming to the city needs to be identified as to its possibilities and ways to avoid this, so that we're working effectively on ensuring that this project does not get out of hand, because we do need to address the social issues that took place within Evergreen Terrace as the primary concern, and then to address the fiscal issues through a bonding process.
Tom?
The company we hired, Holston, that the whole council voted for to hire, the issue come up, how come we don't have a plan? Well, do you develop a plan not knowing if you're going to buy the piece of property, or do you see about buying it? And we don't know yet. I mean, they have 30 days to appeal. We've got a price from the court hearing of $15 million, which is close to what we had it estimated at, but we don't know. They got $30 million to, I'm sorry, they got 30 days to appeal. Holston says that they would reach out to investors. He did not say that all the money would be covered. Gidwitz gets money from HUD, subsidized housing to as rent. Some of that money could be used, but understandably, it's going to cut the density a little better than in half. So we're not going to have as much income we anticipate. But once again, it's a quality of life issue. So we will have to find the money. Hopefully Holston can sell the bonds and get enough investors to pay for it. But right now we don't know. We're still on the starting stages of this plan, and he's going to have more meetings. He had one here not too long ago, and he'll have more meetings, get input from the citizens and from the council.
One moment, just one moment, Bob. We're going to have audience questions soon.
Well, the mayor asked, do you develop a plan if you don't know you're going to buy it? His answer is no. My answer is absolutely yes. To date, Joliet has spent over $7 million in legal fees on Evergreen Terrace. $7 million of your money. Nobody would go out and spend $7 million and not have an idea what the end game is going to be, what they're trying to do, what they're trying to accomplish. This is government spending at its absolute worst. No private business would ever operate this way. Unfortunately, that's what's happened here in Joliet. Mr. Mahalich talked about bringing Holstein in. He must have missed a council meeting. They came forward about a year ago, and they gave about an hour presentation. It was an excellent presentation, and it was quoted very correctly and accurately in the Herald News. What Holstein told us for this project to succeed is that you're going to need, the quote was, a bucket load of money from a lot of different sources. To date, we have not identified who those sources are going to be, and no one has any idea where the bucket load of money is going to come from. Myself and others on the council have been very outspoken about this issue, and quite frankly, we've been demonized by the mayor and others as somehow that we're for Evergreen Terrace or we're fighting for Gidwitz. That was never the case. It's not the case today. We have a challenge at Evergreen Terrace, but as the mayor acknowledged, there is no plan on how to meet that. I've met with several individuals in our community who have proposed good, solid propositions about non-for-profits. I've met with people that I work with in Chicago about how the city of Chicago got this done. I think I spelled out earlier the way forward. But Wayne, your question, which is accurate, and I think it's the big secret, the lie that no one wants to tell. Right now, the only source of revenue, the only way to pay for Evergreen Terrace is to keep the buildings there, keep the tenants there, and collect the rent money and use that to pay down this. That's not what anyone from the city wants to admit is going to happen. It's my opinion that that's what is going to happen, that you've been lied to by city government. When they talk about tearing it down, but they can't identify where the money's going to come from to tear it down, it leads me to believe that you're not being told the truth about what the plans are for Evergreen Terrace.
Just a quick interjection here. I believe the Times Weekly covered that issue quite well, too.
Yeah. You did. Thank you.
Not to show my bias, but tell us what you would do to create more jobs that pay enough to support a family of 4. There's been much rhetoric, and again, part of almost all the campaign literature that I've reviewed, that we're talking about good-paying jobs. So, as part of your answer, define a good-paying job. What is a good-paying job, and then how you're going to create those jobs. And we'll start with the mayor on this one.
I'll continue to do what I've been doing, bringing businesses here. A good-paying job, depends on the needs. If the person is single or married, has a family, it all depends on the needs. But I've brought many jobs here with the Home Depot, the Rapid Distribution Center, Home Depot warehouse. They're all good-paying jobs. The statement has been made that they're not, but they are. They get benefits, they get decent pay, health and welfare benefits. Anyway, Home Depot does that. Neovia, who we brought here out at Center Point, they're good-paying jobs. APL is the biggest company in the world that does. But anyway, they're all union. APL is. They're out there. I've worked to bring them jobs here. The construction job, thousands of construction job, not to mention the people that are working there. I will continue to do that. They're not all good. We have restaurants that the jobs are not high paying, but you know what? You have to start somewhere. When I was going to school, I was slinging hamburgers in a restaurant for about $4 an hour. So you have to start somewhere. But a good paying job depends on what kind of liabilities you have as far as family, a wife, et cetera, et cetera. Naturally, the bigger your family, the more you need. But I've been doing that, and I will continue to do that.
Andy?
There was a presentation made at the city council by the superintendent for high school district. She stated that 60% of the students that attend our public system are economically disadvantaged, and only 1/6 of those go on to higher education. So the majority of our students graduating are graduating with a high school diploma or less. If we truly want to change the city to attract companies to come to this area, we have to have a highly skilled workforce. To get a higher skilled workforce, we need not only to encourage completion of high school, but encourage post-secondary education. So for us to attract those types of businesses, we need to have educational encouragement within the school system to get those, the vast majority of our students to go on to post-secondary education. So that's the first key to good business development. Companies are going to come here because we have the location. We want the best companies coming here, the right companies coming here. We need to have a business attraction plan for all of our industrial parks. But just as importantly, we also need to have a retention plan for all of our major employers. We can see what's happening for Caterpillar Tractor. We need a taxing and financing district around St. Joseph Medical Center. We need to be working on this problem both from a worker skill issue to a business retraction issue, as well as a business retention issue if we truly want to grow and have good paying jobs.
Thank you. Two more questions, and then we're going to move to audience questions.
I didn't answer.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you. I think the answer is simple. I think to bring good paying jobs into Joliet, Joliet needs to hire an economic development director and develop, for the first time in its city's history, an economic development plan. We're the fourth biggest city in Illinois. This has never been done. The mayor several times has made reference to jobs coming into Center Point. Here's the reality of what happens at Center Point. It's the largest intermodal in the country. It's there. Businesses are coming. They're going to continue to come. For myself or another councilman or the mayor to take credit for what Center Point does for itself is wrong. Center Point has an economic development team. Center Point markets itself, and Center Point does bring quality businesses into its own entity, its own business entity. Same thing the mall does. Our mall, which is a great economic engine, has an economic development director that brings businesses into the mall. It's unfortunate that some politicians want to take credit for what other people are doing. What I'm saying is Joliet can do this for itself. Joliet needs an economic development director and a plan to get these businesses in here. And specifically, Wayne, what I'd like to see, instead of simply getting shipping companies or warehouse jobs, which are fine, they're good for our local economy, I would love to see Joliet lean on these corporations and start having corporate headquarters relocate to Joliet, where there are the high-paying quality jobs that you talk about, where people can raise children, where they can pay a mortgage, where they can put their kids through private school if they need to. Those aren't coming into Joliet. They're not going to come with the current mode we're following. And simply waiting for the next store to come to Louis Joliet Mall or the next business to come to Center Point and say that that's economic development, it's not getting the job done. But I think we know how to get the job done. All you have to do is look at what Center Point's doing for itself and ask yourself, why isn't Joliet doing the same thing? Other cities do it. Every other major city does it. It's never been done here. When I'm mayor, you will see that happen in Joliet.
Thank you. In our first question, we asked you why someone should vote for you to be mayor. If you are elected, what is your vision for the city in 5 years? And we'll start with Andy.
My vision is that Joliet becomes a world-class city. Now, what's a world-class city? It has all of the shopping and eating options available. It has great recreational choices. It has good paying jobs with benefits for all of its citizens. It's a safe place. All of the neighborhoods throughout the city are safe. So we need to have a global vision for the city that is positive, that reflects our history of being the city of champions. Yes, we have problems that need to be addressed, but the possibilities for the city of Joliet are tremendous. We need to take advantage of those possibilities, turn those possibilities into opportunities, be inclusive for everyone throughout the city so that everyone shares and benefits from the city's future. So I would see that we can be much more than we are now. Joliet deserves much more than we are, and we have the opportunities because we have a good base from which to work, both in terms of infrastructure and people.
Bob?
I'd like to see Joliet in a much better shape financially than it is today. There are problems that we're digging out of. We just floated a bond for an underwater tunnel for a wastewater project, which the city knew since the 1980s, the EPA has been telling us we had to do. Again, the can was kicked down the road for years. I talked about pensions being underfunded. Again, I think I've spoken about what my vision is. Joliet needs to redefine itself. Joliet needs to redevelop or develop the far west side to get those areas to start generating tax revenue and begin to pay for themselves. And Joliet needs to follow new business mode. This city needs to actively and aggressively market itself, to go out and sell itself. I think if you look at what some neighboring communities have done and how they've remade themselves in the last 15, 20 years, it could be done in Illinois, it could be done in Will County. If it's happened in other communities, it's something that can happen here. I think the key would be new leadership and aggressive leadership. When I talk about ideas of lobbyists, that's never been done in Joliet's history, or economic development director, which has never been done in Joliet's history, or an economic development plan, which has never been done. These are new ideas. They're not going to get implemented by Mayor Girani. Mayor, in all due respect, you fought the idea and voted against the idea of an economic development committee when it was proposed by the council. I think Joliet residents see what they've gotten. It's not going to change in the next 4 years under the current leadership. I think I have given a vision and an idea of where to go, and I think working together with the council, it's something that we can achieve.
Thank you. The last question has a personal note in it.
You don't want my answer?
Oh, I'm sorry. Again, I'm only thinking.
Huh?
My apologies.
No, it's all right, no problem. APL is the biggest container corporation. And as far as Centerpoint, I'll get to your question. Back when they were thinking of coming here, the council elected me to be liaison to meet with Centerpoint and to bring them here, a $2 billion project. At that time, they were looking for some help from us. They were doing $180 million in infrastructure. We gave them nothing. Okay, you talk about jobs. IKEA is going to build 2 warehouses out here. There was a meeting with the legislative committee this past week. There's a trucking company that's going to bring their corporate headquarters here at Laraway Road and Route 53. My outlook is this. We need to do a medical campus around President St. Joe's Hospital, past the TIF district, as Andy mentioned before. We also we need to do something downtown to bring business, to bring footprints. I think we've gone a long way with the junior college, going to bring 400 students down here. The University of St. Francis, I believe throughout a month they bring about 400 students down here. We need to improve diversity in our police departments, our fire departments, and our city workers. There's no question about it. We have a shortfall there. But we need to keep on the same track, bring business here, jobs here. We need to do that in sales tax and real estate taxes so we don't have to go to the taxpayers and raise taxes. That's what we need to do, and I've been doing that for the last 4 years.
Thank you. Again, my apologies to you
That's
too
all right,
for
no problem.
for cutting you off. Didn't mean to. But the last question, as I said, has a bit of a personal note in it. Several years ago, now I forget exactly how far back this goes, but the city built 8 different flag pavilions around the city, on the edge of the city. The city did not, for whatever reason, put lights on those flag pavilions. Therefore, the flags can only be flown during the day. There's also never any. There is no one assigned to put them at half staff. It seems to be, from my observation, and flying the flag is one of my personal desires. I think it's important for the city to fly the flag 24/7. So as part of Joliet's appearance and the impact it has not only on its citizens but those coming to our citizen, is there a commitment from you as a mayor, if you were to be elected as mayor, to put lights on those flags? And I might add, I do think it's commendable that I believe it was the fire department, put solar lights on the flags. Those are totally inadequate. They do not. They look like we did something on the cheap for the 4th largest city in the state. I think that's I think we're shortchanging ourselves with that appearance. So can I get a commitment from all of you to rectify that situation? And we'll start with the mayor.
There's no question there was an oversight on the planning division. The solar lights don't do the job. Before I make a commitment, I want to know how much it's going to cost to take them solar lights out of it. The problem is a lot of them, where the flags are, there's no electricity.
If I could interrupt you just a second to say that perhaps it is possible that we could do this with some of our labor unions on a volunteer basis. Perhaps we can get some donations, but certainly I think the cost of doing that, it was quoted several years ago when Tom Thanis was the city manager, it would cost about $45,000. So
Per or total?
Total.
Okay. Well, if that's all it is, that's not bad. I thought it'd be more than that. As far as the labor unions, I work well with them. This past week, I was at by the Rialto, and the painters and drywallers are in there. The apprentices donating their time painting. They're going to do some tuck pointing. I will certainly work with the trades to see if we can get some of that work done. But at $45,000, if that's all it is, I have no problem making that commitment.
Andy?
At that dollar amount, I would have no problem making that commitment. But let me just go on to say that I think that these issues, other similar issues, this is where public-private partnerships need to be made. We need to identify these projects, just like I wanted to do art, food, or other issues, even public housing in terms of public-private partnerships. Those are the ways to do that. I also propose that we hire grant writers on a contractualized basis. These are definitely the types of projects that are available.
Okay.
And if we look at, we can
Andy,
go into foundations as well.
I don't want to go too far in that because we got to move on, but Bob?
Yes, I would make that commitment. Wayne, as you know, I work with the fire department when the solar lights were put there. I agree they're not adequate. I think beyond lighting the flags, I think the entrances to all our city entrances need to be improved. But certainly that's a valuable, what you're offering, or what you're suggesting, is something that should be done by the city of Joliet.
Thank you. Thank you to all of you. Get that accomplished. I think you've accomplished something. Now we'd like to have some audience participation, questions. If you want to come down to the front, is there a mic? We got a mic? No, there it is. I didn't see the mic. Well, you see, getting old.
Yes, good morning. First of all, thank you.
And before you everybody starts, please limit your question to no more than a minute, if you could.
Yes, sir. Thank you for this forum. On behalf of the minority community and myself being a local union contractor, I would just like to state that for the record, my company and I myself personally get up every morning at 4:30 and travel to Chicago and work until 2 o'clock managing people because I can't get a job here in my hometown where I pay taxes at. Thank you that Chicago welcomes me and they do not look at me as an outsider and they look at me as a business owner that has to feed his family. With that being said, Mr. Mahalik, I understand that Joliet Junior College has built multiple buildings in Joliet, and in the bid documents, it's stated that minority participation is encouraged but not required. And yet you still sit here today and express to us that you would like to have minority participation. Mr. Mayor, you have, in 4 years, we came to you ago and you said you didn't want to create anything because we didn't want to rush because the council was there in 2011, and yet you still sit here today and say that you positively support minority participation. And Mr. Odekirk, if I had any evidence on you, I would present it today as well. But my question to you guys is, after waiting and watching your past practices, yet you sit here today and still promote minority participation, Why should we believe you when nothing has changed since 2011, and yet you have already shown us what your beliefs are in your bid documents? When is this going to change, and why should we believe you now when your past practices have already shown us no indication of change?
Thank you. We'll start with Andy.
To address the issues within the bid practices of the college, those are developed by law through the Illinois Community College Act, and we need to follow that act. So we cannot step outside and create our own specific intents that we would like to do to change that. So we're limited to putting in all of our bid documents that is minority participation required. So that's the process under state law. I would believe, though, that the college did a very good job in having a good portion of its bid contracts go to minority businesses.
Tom?
What was your question for me?
My question for you was, in 2011, we came before council requesting minority participation goals on projects, not set-asides.
Just a question.
Okay. Goals on projects.
Well, it was my understanding that it was set aside. I was at a meeting at Pastor Brooks's church, and I believe you were there, and Willie Sellers was there, and the discussion then was set-asides. And I told you how I felt about set-asides. I have no problem with minority participation. If you're pre-qualified and you bid on, I have no problem whatsoever. The problem with set-asides, if there's not enough minority contractors, okay, don't shake your head. There's not enough minority contractors, and the ultimate result would be costing the taxpayers more money, or the local minority contractors won't get the job, somebody from Chicago.
So for the record, so I understand you correctly, you're saying, I mean, first of all, I'm not talking about set-asides,
Okay,
Mr. Mayor.
good.
Okay.
Okay.
What I'm talking about is the fact that now we are at the City Hall and we're getting ready to pass an ordinance for local contractors that we can formulate in a matter of 6 months, and yet we've been waiting 4 years, and there's no reference to minority in the local ordinance that's getting ready to be passed.
So that we can get to everybody, though. Let's rather get a response from Mr. Odekirk here.
I think the question is well-founded. I think actions speak louder than words. And, you know, talk is cheap. Certainly on the campaign trail, it's very cheap. I came to the council 4 years ago as an independent voice. I've held myself up on the council that way. Obviously, I've disagreed with the mayor on many occasions, but going forward, I believe that what you're proposing, what you're saying needs to happen in Joliet. I do share the concerns about if it was only minority contractors, that local contractors, minority, non-minority, may be squeezed down the process, and that's my one concern.
Next.
Yes, my name is Willis Sellers. Tom, you said that you didn't want to put minority participation percentage or anything in the contract because it might bring minorities from other cities, other towns in here doing work. So you're going to leave us out because you don't want to do that. But what are you doing to keep the white businesses from out of town coming to here working? You don't want minorities from other towns to come into Joliet and work, yet we go to Chicago and work, but you let the white contractors come in here from out of town and work. That seems to be a little biased to me. So how you explain that?
Willie, are you pre-qualified to bid for Joliet?
I done told you a dozen times that I'm certified from St. Louis to Rockford.
But you also made the statement.
That wasn't my question. And
Well,
you not
wait a minute. Okay.
Answer my question.
Wait, but that's part of the question. If you're not
I
pre-qualified,
done
you
told
can't
you
bid.
that I'm certified.
I never said I was. I said I was against set-asides. I never said I was
Now,
against.
we're talking about people coming in from out of town. You said that you don't want to put anything in place because it might bring minorities or whatever in from out of town and get this work. I said, now, what are you doing to stop the white contractors from out of town coming here working, since you don't want no minorities to come in from out of town here working? That seems to be biased.
But it's the same. If you're going to open it up for the white contractors, you open
Well, what
it
are
up
you
for
doing
the
to stop
minority
the, what are you doing to
Brett.
stop the white ones?
Mr. Sellers, if we're trying
Okay.
to avoid a debate back and forth here, but are you looking for a response from the other two?
I'm gonna let him answer.
The answer is I'm not against minority participation. I'm just saying that if you don't have enough minority local contractors, that there's no guarantee that they're gonna get the bid. That's what I'm saying. I am against set-asides.
And are you looking for a response from the other two also?
Yes,
Okay.
either one.
Andy?
Well, we have to increase minority business certification. I stated that we need to have ongoing training sessions. I also stated in my ideas, just to elaborate on your point, to track that, we could even develop one-on-one counseling through the Small Business Administration, so that the first intent is to get more minority businesses certified. We can't increase the percent of minority businesses getting city contracts if we don't have enough minority businesses to bid on the contracts. So we need a vast number of more businesses. That needs to be done through training and counseling.
Bob?
I agree. I think the certification and helping minority businesses get certified is something the city can absolutely do better. As far as going forward, I think there should be a preference for local contractors, both minority and non-minority. My preference is to keep it local whenever possible.
All right, thank you.
Good morning. Hi, my name is Trista Brown, and I just want to make a comment and as well as a question. I know we talk a lot about the east side and the south side of Joliet. I first want to remind that the Joliet east side and south side Joliet is made of all people, not just blacks, not just Mexican. There's also white people that are in that area. We talked about how we can do better as far as engaging the community. Well, we do have two organizations called 815 and Family and Friends. They have been engaging in our community and make a difference for 2 years. And my question is, are you not aware what it is going on in the community and besides of the past and the present? We're talking about our future and our kids. So we do have our young men and our young women of all ethnics that are out there doing something. Do you anything know about 815? Do you know about Family and Friends who's been on McDonough Street, Kathy Beavers, who's been out there doing things? How are you guys going to help them to continue? They didn't ask any money from anybody, but they're out there doing it to make our city and Joliet a better place. But I don't see anyone talk about those two organizations, 815 and Family and Friends. Are you going to do anything to help with that our organization to continue to do some of the things that you're not doing? They're taking upon themselves to do it.
We'll let the candidates answer the question. We'll start with Andy.
I stopped over at Family and Friends last Saturday morning to listen to the needs of our homeless veterans. I stated that we need to accept the challenge to end veterans' homelessness within Joliet. Just to give you a little example, just a small little idea for that we can address the two. I believe the city should be courting Uber to provide shuttle services where our veterans could drive, make some additional monies, start it downtown. So there's good organizations out there, Men of Valor and others that we could be utilizing for the educational encouragement, the 2.0 mentor program through Big Brothers Big Sisters. We need to bring them all together and utilize these groups to be part of the solution.
Sorry, Bob. Yeah, Bob.
Yeah, Krista, I am aware. My wife, as you know, was born and raised on the east side of Joliet. My mother and father-in-law still live on the east side of Joliet. So I'm very well aware of what's going on in those neighborhoods. To your point, Men of Valor, too, have had several different functions, including an anti-violence march last Saturday. I marched with Men of Valor. I was the only mayoral candidate to do that. I've been the only mayoral candidate to go and work with Pastor Posley and Pastor Wilburn and what they're trying to do. I think there's good neighborhood-based groups all over the city. I think mayor of the city needs to reach out to all of them, work with all of them, including the two that you've mentioned. I've done it as a councilman. I'll continue to do it as a mayor.
Tom?
There are many great organizations out there. to reach out to them, how are you going to reach out to them if you don't know about them? I depend on them to reach out to me to get me involved. I'll be very honest, where's Krista? 815, I'm not familiar with them, okay? Well, I'm not. Okay, you're talking about Unity CDC? Well, I'm not familiar with that. But they need to reach out to me for me to get involved. That's all I can say, and I do get involved.
Next.
Okay, I got a couple of questions.
If you could keep it to one, so that we've got about 25 more minutes in order to get everybody in. If you could just keep it. And
I haven't heard
candidates keep it brief.
I haven't heard it.
1 minute.
Okay, I haven't heard any talk on education, and I'm wondering what your take on education as it ties into economic development. And I'm saying that for the sake of people might be trying to come into Joliet, and the first thing they do is find out the numbers on what are we doing with the education, the dropout rates, and all that stuff. So we keep talking about we're the 4th largest city in Illinois, and we're down the bottom quartile as far as our education.
Bob, you want to start there?
I talked a little bit about education. Obviously, the school boards run those programs. The city doesn't. I did talk about, when we were talking about city workers leaving the city, and I talked about those children moving out, those middle class or upper middle class kids moving out, how it does affect their school system. Because you're right. Any business or anyone looking at Joliet, they look at how school systems are ranked. And I think that the drain that we've had with a lot of our workers moving them and their families out have hurt our school systems. And I think it's reflecting the numbers, and I think ultimately it hurts our community. I think it's a small change, but when we talk about renegotiating contracts, putting residency back in, it's a small step towards helping our school system from the city side.
What are you guys doing to reach out to the schools so you can help with those numbers to elevate them?
Andy, we'll let you answer that part.
As I stated previously, that the city needs to step outside of its comfort zone of municipal governance and work with especially school boards. One of the issues that we have facing right now is the perception that our schools are not doing a good job. This affects property values. It detracts against people selecting Joliet as the place that they want to locate, and they'll go to one of our adjoining communities. We need to sit down with we need to meet with the superintendents, the school board presidents, and ask, what do you need the city to do? We recognize these are some of the problems. On school ratings, that affects property values, income to the schools and income to the city. We need to work on win-win scenarios that not only helps us, but helps our students to graduate and proceed on to higher education.
I think one of the concerns, we do have a great school district, but one of the things that they're missing, not everybody is going to be educated to go to work on computers or what have you. We need to get back down to the basics. We need to teach these kids, maybe they do teach them how to be mechanics, maybe workshop, wood shops. I was at a CED meeting. We have 2 Ierwa County Center for Economic Development, and there was a gentleman there that owns a trucking company. He says he put out applications for truck drivers. He can't get enough. So they need to get back to the basics. Everybody can't go into computers. I would have never when I was in school. So they need to get back to the basics and teach these kids what they can do when they get out of high school. Maybe they're not going to go to college, and teach them those kind of work habits.
Next person.
Good morning. My name is Mary White, and I live here in Joliet. I was born and raised here in Joliet, and my family was one of the first families that lived in the projects up in the up on Fairmount, and I also was homeless here in Joliet. And my question during all of this, I haven't heard any discussion about the homeless situation here. And, before I really get to the question, I also want to say that I also lived in Evergreen, because after I was homeless and after God started working in me, Evergreen was the only place that I had to go. Today I have a master's degree. Today I work in the community and everything. So Evergreen was a blessing for me, you know, and all of that there. But for our homeless people vote. They are, you know, our homeless community are voters. They have voters cards. And the question is that what are we going to do? What are you going to do to address the homeless situation here in Joliet?
Tom, we'll start with you.
First of all, we've never addressed it yet tonight because we were never asked about it, okay? And we didn't mention our comments, Mary, but you know, you have daycare and you have Morning Star Mission that addresses that. Is that enough? But the concern is they're looking at possible cuts to their budget. They do a lot. Getting back to Evergreen Terrace, as long as you understand, if in fact we do take that over, we have to give those residents vouchers. Find home. We have to give them 2 options where to go to. So we have to give them vouchers. But I think daycare and Morning Star Mission does a good job to help the homeless.
Andy?
As I mentioned, I was visiting our homeless veterans just last week. I'm also proposing that we establish a mayor's task force on the homeless so we can begin addressing these issues. I did state that we should be accepting the mayor's challenge where 300 cities across the country have accepted the challenge to end veterans' homelessness. New Orleans just now being the first city to find housing for 227 residents. So within those 300 cities, we should be contacting those cities to see what they have been doing successfully and see which ideas we can implement here. We don't need to reinvent the wheel on many issues. We need to identify the best practices that are going on in our similar cities and bring those best practices to Joliet.
Bob?
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with Mr. Mahalich regarding veterans homeless. I agree with the mayor. I think Daybreak Shelter and I think Catholic Charities, I think we do have good services available for our homeless here in Joliet. You probably know better than I do, but I do know as a former police officer dealing with homeless that many in the homeless community will tell you they're transients from different parts of the country and that they are actually attracted to Joliet because of the amount of services we provide for homeless people here. I think Catholic Charities does a great job. I think we should work with the Archdiocese going forward to continue that.
Thank you. Real quick.
Okay, real quick. You know, there's a homeless woman. I'm not saying Catholic Charities and you know, and Morning Star, they do a great job. But there's a homeless woman. There was a homeless woman that came in. She was out of county, so she could only stay at Daybreak for 3 days. She didn't have anywhere to go. Morning Star Mission don't have a emergency shelter for homeless women here in Joliet because they are not zoned for one. So there is a big issue and there is a devastating gap in services, especially when it comes to homeless women here in Joliet.
Thank you for the comments. We have time for 2 more questions, and please keep them brief. And candidates, if you could keep your answers as brief as possible so we can get to the last section here.
We've talked about a lot of heavy issues, but I think the face of Joliet is the mayor and several other people in the community. But when we also talk about the face of Joliet, we talk about the aesthetics of Joliet, which is very troubling. When you go through our city, we don't look well kept. It's hard to attract businesses, I would imagine, because of that fact. And I would like to know what you as individuals would do. As a follow-up question, are our employees who drive city vehicles and are part of the city and paid by us ever instructed to, when they see an issue, report it, take care of it, or do something to make it a better place so that we can attract other businesses? Thank you.
And we'll start with Bob.
Yeah, I agree. I spoke about the entrances to the city. I think it says a lot about Joliet. If you, for example, go in Bolingbrook and get off of I-55 at Route 53, you see the money that they've spent to make Bolingbrook look good, and compare it to what happens on Richard Street or South Chicago Street. It's something that we need to improve in Joliet. We certainly need to improve on it downtown. As far as the employees, I do think that they're instructed, and I think our employees are pretty conscientious about caring for the city. I can't speak on an individual basis, but I know the department heads do try to foster that and there are employees to do what they can for Joliet, not just punch a clock and work a 9-to-5 job. Most of our employees do live in the city. Most of them are from Joliet, and they love the city, and I think that they showed that in the work that they do.
Tom?
I'm going to propose, when I'm reelected, to take some money to hire some part-time kids. We used to do it years ago, get some high school kids, some college kids, and hire them to help our city employees clean up those entrances. We have money in the budget. Not in the budget. We have money in the reserve fund because of my budget that I passed in 2012. Take some of that money and hire some students to help us clean up the area. And I hope, and I'm going to find out, but I hope the foreman of the city crews instructs his employees, the people that work for him, to, when they see something, to either report it or clean it up. I hope he's doing that.
Andy?
Economic development and job creation starts with how the city looks. It should be given a high priority. I stated that as one of my goals. Let's clean up the city one street at a time. It's not only good for the appearance of the city, but it instills pride in the individual residents, and it fosters economic vitality among the business districts. I proposed utilizing community service hours from the courts as a directive to help clean up all of the entryways into the city. So we need to be looking at this not just from the city appearances as to garbage, but is looking at it from also business signages. I saw that we're now passed through the legislative committee temporary signs. We need to go much further, and all of our business signs throughout the city, those also are part of the issue as well. But it is definitely one of the priorities, and definitely one of my priorities.
Next.
Thank you. My name is Ardale Evans, and the amount of time that was spent earlier with regards to the police department and the makeup of the police department shows how important it is to the city and to the residents. I am that one African American that's been appointed to the Police and Fire Board, and I can give you just a little background. When I first got on the Police and Fire Board, it's really egregious what the numbers look like as far as the adverse impact. And the first thing that we did, probably about 3 years ago, was an ability to address
Mr.
that.
Evans,
right,
I have a question.
I think this is important. This was a big issue.
I understand, but
right.
I want a question. He's not running.
Right.
Well,
was to have lateral transfers in an effort to get more African Americans onto the force. We talked about the last testing that we had. I actually went to that test myself. There were 500 people there, and just doing my own count, there may have been 20 minorities that actually shown up. The question is this, is that in order to get African Americans and minorities in the room, to get on the bench, to even get into the game, what is the plan? The Explorers is one group, but would you support having an African American and minority team go out to talk to young people who look just like them, to get them excited and encouraged about the police department at junior high and high school level? High school level.
Tom?
absolutely. I definitely would support that. I did it, as I stated, I did it when I was president of the firefighters with Rodney Marion. We went out and met at the Homeowners Association, and I passed the first and only affirmative action plan for the city of Joliet to help hire minorities and help promote minorities. I am all for that, and I wish you would do that. That's a great idea.
Bob?
I also agree it's a great idea. I'd like to tell Mr. Evans, I think he's done a good job. There was an issue on the council about a year ago. I was approached by 2 members of the Police and Fire Board who raised concerns that the fire department test had been leaked. It had been given to firemen who were passing it out to their friends and family members. And I believe they were honorable men that came forward and blew the whistle on this, whether it happened or not. But I think Mr. Evans would agree, the issue when things like this happen is it sends a real message, whether it happened or not. The perception's horrible. And I can only imagine what young people in our community think if they're not related to someone on the fire department, that they may not have a fair shot. And I think we have to work hard to make sure that minorities and everyone in Joliet knows that the system is not rigged, that it's fair for everybody. So I do compliment the current members of the Police and Fire Board for stepping up and doing the right thing when they saw that there was a problem.
Who was next? Andy, I'm sorry.
I favor being inclusive on all the appointments for boards, commissions throughout the city. In my ideas, I stated that. But I also state within my ideas and what I believe is a process to get there. One of the things that the city is definitely lacking is an application process to serve on boards and commissions. In the first 100 days, if I'm elected mayor, that will be my top priority, is to get a process in place so that people can apply for the various boards and commissions. We don't have vision statements, nor do we have what each committee member is to do in terms of their duties and responsibilities. We need to develop those for every committee. And we also need to have not just an application process, but a nomination process, so that anybody can recommend somebody to serve on these boards, so a person that might be a little reluctant to come forward is then asked to come forward, and we'll find that more people would accept that.
Thanks,
so
Andy.
That's how I achieve it.
I'll give you one shot because we do want to try and wrap this up in the next 15 minutes.
I just was wondering what the city is doing now proactively to counterback the possibility of LGDF cuts possibly in the next fiscal year coming from the state.
Just because of time constraints, 30 seconds. And we'll start with Andy.
I don't know what the city is doing. I'm not on the city council, but the city needs to begin having discussions, because these any reductions coming from the state could be significant. So some ideas, some possibilities need to be discussed. We heard the city manager say that if we are to cut, it's $100,000 per employee. And if the budget cuts reach 6 or 7 million, that's 60 or 70 people that may need to be cut, and we should be looking at that beforehand.
Tom?
From what I'm hearing from our representative in Springfield, his first barrage was it's going to cost us $7 million. I'm hearing that's not the true number, but we have asked the city manager to look into, if something like this happens, what our alternatives are going to be. But the $7 million barrage, when I talked to Representative Manley and the state senators, and Larry Walsh, they think that's his first approach, and it's going to be less. But we've asked the city manager to look into what we're going to do if in fact that happens.
Bob?
The mayor's correct. We did raise this issue at a council meeting. Currently there's been no adjustments to the budget. Personally, besides discussing it at the council level, I also have met with state representatives and talked to them about what they believe the real number will be. So I do think the council has been somewhat proactive on this. It's hard to make adjustments when we don't know what the real final number is going to be.
No, we're going to conclude. We're going to conclude the audience questions. I hope that we've answered most of them. We're going to give the candidates an opportunity to ask each other a question. We're going to start with Tom.
First of all,
and you can ask either or both.
Okay. First of all, I'm going to address, Andy brought up the boards. When I became mayor, I didn't change the boards. I figure if it's not broke, don't change it. The only one I addressed was the Housing Authority, because I got a letter from HUD that things weren't going well. So I went from 7 to 5, and they've really turned it around. As far as questions, I don't have any at this time for anyone.
Andy?
If the Rialto was to
Who's it directed to?
Pardon?
Who are you directing it to? Both, okay.
If the Rialto board was to come to the city and say, we need an additional $200,000 to cover the cost of the marquee that was being developed, would you give the Rialto board that money?
No, I would not. I would like to see their budget and see what they've done, but at this time, I would not, no.
Bob?
No, I wouldn't either, and Wayne, compliments to you. I think you have written very well about the Rialto board and some of the financial issues there. But no, I agree with the mayor. I would not either.
Bob, your questions?
I have no questions.
Sir? Who had the question?
Yes, my question is...
If you could come down to the mic, you can come down to the mic. See, all of the candidates were so succinct. They didn't even have any questions of each other.
Okay, this question is, to the mayor. At the last debate, which you was not at, there was a question brung up as far as there was going to be at Evergreen Terrace, there was going to be like 130-something units that was going to be subsidized by low-income housing. And there's like 356 units, I believe, there. What is your plans to do with the rest of them, or what were they, or what will they be to do with the rest of those units? And a question after that, why was you not at the last debate?
First of all, what we would do, HUD would oversee this, and I think I mentioned briefly before, we have to offer those residents at least 2 Section 8 housing to move them to. That's mandatory. We cannot throw them out in the cold. HUD would not stand for that, and we wouldn't do that. So we have to give them at least 2 options on where they would move to. I was not at the last debate because I thought it was rigged. I'll go to any fair debate. And originally I signed up to go. Then I found out who the moderator is and a couple other board members. In the meantime, Pastor Lattimore from the Mount Zion Church sent me an email and asked me to meet with himself and 10 other preachers that evening at Mount Zion Church. When I found out what the makeup was of the board was, I told him I wasn't going to go, and I met that same evening at 7 o'clock at Mount Zion Church with Pastor Lattimore and 11 other preachers. That's why I wasn't there.
We're going to give each candidate a closing 2 minutes for their closing statement, and we're going to start with Andy.
I developed my 101 ideas for Joliet to give us a bold new vision for the city. I'd ask each of you to review those ideas. There's a copy, a packet of materials outside. Take a look at that, and you can see just how comprehensive the approach is. I believe that I have given a comprehensive plan for a new direction to the city. Each individual component part is dependent upon another. So you can't have economic development without improving the job skills of workers, without improving the school system, without making the city cleaner and more attractive. So each is interdependent of the others. And I believe I laid out those ideas in a plan that is realistic and fundable. We need to reprioritize all of our spending priorities within the city to determine what is our best approach for revenue generation on the other side, besides raising our sales and property tax rates. Commercial development is going to be the key, and I probably have 15 ideas related to economic development and job creation. So I'd ask you to review those, consider this new vision that I have for Joliet, and I ask for your vote for Mayor of Joliet April 7th. Thank you very much.
Tom?
Joliet is in better shape today than it was 4 years ago when I took over. There's no question about it. We have a balanced budget for the last 4 years. We have a nice reserve fund. I want to continue to do that. Bob says that we didn't do $500 million in permit fees. I beg to differ. I got them numbers from our staff. I want to keep Joliet moving forward. We are a great city. We don't need to be great again. We are a great city thanks to the people that live here, work here, raise their families here, and folks like you that make this city great. We don't need to be great again. We are revitalized. Things are well. We're doing great. Do we have some shortcomings? Absolutely. There's no question. A city this size is going to have shortcomings. We'll hit some bumps in the road, but we need to work together to move forward and take care of them shortcomings and keep this city moving forward like the great city that it is.
Bob?
Again, thank you for this forum. I'm Bob Odekirk. Once again, I was a policeman here in Joliet for 10 years. I currently am an attorney. I own a law practice downtown. I would ask you to consider my resume, what I've done with my life and what I've been able to accomplish. I spent 20 months in Iraq. I worked for the U.S. State Department. I was in command of over 270 people. I've proven that I'm a leader, both as a police officer, a highly decorated police officer, with the time I spent overseas, and then back here contributing to our local economy, owning a business in downtown Joliet. I'm married. I have 3 children, a 14-year-old daughter, a 10-year-old special needs son, and an 8-year-old daughter. We live in the Cathedral area. We're parishioners at St. Raymond's. My wife is born and raised in Joliet, lifetime East Side resident, as I mentioned earlier. I think what we've seen here is a dichotomy between what's happened in the past and what the vision is for the future. Yeah, I've talked about $700 million in riverboat revenue, which is gone. I've talked about pensions, which are underfunded. I've talked about a mayor whose answer is to raise taxes after years of economic boom because money was not spent the right way. And I think I've demonstrated, or I've argued what my vision is going forward, how to correct the problems with Joliet. I think I've demonstrated my 4 years on the city council. I am an independent voice. I was not tied to any labor union or special interest groups. I certainly wasn't given private fundraisers in Oak Brook, like our mayor has, $25,000 fundraisers that apparently weren't good enough to come to Joliet. I work for the people of District 2. I'll work for the people of Joliet. I'll do what I think is right going forward. So I ask for your support on April 7th. And again, thank you to Times Weekly for this forum.
Thank you all for coming and taking the opportunity to listen to the 3 candidates for mayor. We thank the candidates for their answers to the questions. And this is not an easy thing to do, to run for any elected office. It's certainly a very difficult decision to decide to run for mayor of Joliet. And I think they've demonstrated their ideas. They've talked about their vision, and may the best person win on April 7th, Election Day. And this will be available at the Times Weekly website. You're welcome to stay if the candidates can stay and meet with any of you. We thank you again for your participation, and good luck voting.
Wayne, thank you. You're right on. Thank you.
Hey.